I now have the great honor of introducing the closing keynote speaker, Dr. Linda Darling-Hammond, President of the State Board of Education, who will share her vision for California public education and how we get there. Due to her State Board of Education commitments, she cannot join us live. However, she graciously provided us with a pre-recording of her closing remarks to conclude day 2 of the Water Cooler Conference.
I am delighted to be able to join you, at least virtually, for this important conference at this critical time. As you all know, we've been emerging from the pandemic, acknowledging the deep inequalities that it raised to the surface, and restarting and reinventing schools in California. Together, students and families, advocates and policymakers, educators are constructing a new framework for education in this state. And while you've been meeting together in this conference, I've been engaging in a state board meeting where many of the initiatives that we've worked on with so many of you are being taken up for implementation. We're looking to build on California's Innovative Accountability Dashboard, which honors growth as well as accomplishments and extends to the ways in which it can highlight and address school climate, encourage civic engagement for our young people, and examine opportunities to learn as well as outcomes. Equitable access to well-qualified teachers, attention to the needs of English learners, including those who have been long-term English learners, investments in the supports for students with disabilities. And of course, we're knee-deep in the implementation of community schools, which are a key element in building a system of belonging and community power in school transformation that is rooted in racial equity. We'll be discussing where students are academically post-pandemic. And as you know, with an influx of substantial resources for extended learning, after school, summer learning, tutoring, for teacher support and professional development, for mitigation strategies in schools, we've really invested in a recovery in ways that very few states have. When we got the data from the National Assessment of Educational Progress, we found that we had less learning loss than the national average and than most other states. And when we got the data on the state assessments, we found that yes, we have experienced, especially our youngest learners, have experienced learning lag, that is, learning less than we had been enabling in the years prior to the pandemic. But that for that cohort that tested in 2021 and 2022, we see a steeper than average gain in that year than was true pre-pandemic. And that kind of acceleration in learning is what we need to continue in the years to come, which is what happens when you fold around students, when you wrap around them the kinds of supports they need for health and mental health, as in our community schools, for learning at one's own rate and at one's own moment of zone of proximal development to make maximum progress, to ensure that we have well-prepared teachers in all of our schools. So this kind of progress that we've seen in the last couple of years is something that we need to double down on as a community and continue. Of course, we've seen enormous progress in the state over the last decade. You all know that just a decade ago, we were at the bottom of all states in terms of academic achievement. We were 47th, 48th, 49th in reading and math. We were at the bottom of states in investment in educational expenditures. As the state became more diverse, the government was disinvesting in public education. We had the largest class sizes, the fewest teachers, the most inexperienced teaching force, especially in those schools. And a lot has been done in this period of time. I remember when we were bringing the Williams lawsuit, for which I was an expert witness, all of the ways in which California's education system was failing its students. When Governor Brown introduced the local control funding formula, we began to change the vision. the historic levels of funding in public education, the progressive nature of the formula, the opportunities for shared power and shared decision-making in the local control funding formula, LCAP planning, which we continue to deepen, reinforce. The governor this year added $100 million for community engagement around that work for us to really be able to make good on the promise of shared decision-making on behalf of our students. We've built on those gains throughout the process of reopening schools with testing and vaccination clinics and mitigation strategies and supports from the state. We had the fewest school closings last year of any state in the country by in proportion to our population. Expanded learning time in most schools, after school and summer learning. 9 out of 10 districts offered summer learning last year. Universal transitional kindergarten, universal pre-K, other investments in childcare, the new bill that was just signed into law for maternity leave and paternity leave for parents of newborns, comprehensive student supports for mental health and physical health, money for educator preparation, retention, solving shortages through the residency models that are now spreading across the state. We now have about 70 residency programs in high need districts where teachers are getting excellent training from expert mentors while they get their teaching credential and have much higher retention rates, much more diversity coming into the educator workforce. We have evidence that those are really beginning to work. They've trained 1,400 teachers just this last year. The investments in the Golden State scholarships that will bring people into programs and pay their way if they teach in priority schools, the investments in board certified teachers in high poverty schools. We now have 2,200 board certified teachers in those schools and about 80 schools where a team of teachers are all training together to become board certified and develop that accomplished practice and that accomplished mentoring that's going to help the entire school get better. All of those things and the investments in special education that have grown and grown each year are making it possible for schools to begin to meet the needs of students. But we have much more work to do. We have challenges on the horizon to address in this coming year. We have declining enrollment. We've lost some kids from the public school system. And we have some who voted with their feet in cities and in contexts where the factory model school is not able to meet their needs. We have staffing shortages in part for the same reason, the stresses of the pandemic, the ways in which schools need to adjust, adapt, and redesign themselves to become relationship-centered, to become restorative in the way that they approach students and the work of building a community, and to become responsive to the funds of knowledge that students bring in, to the assets that they bring to their families and to their needs. The new 3 R's for thriving schools. We need them to be relationship-centered, we need them to be restorative, and we need them to be responsive. And that's going to take partnership between those of us who are working in research and in policy, those who are working in the schools themselves as educators and families and students together. We need to build bridges across the early childhood and K through 12 systems. We've now got universal preschool starting for 4-year-olds. It's coming online. There are a lot of needs and challenges in staffing those classrooms, but they are going to be much smaller in terms of the class size and the pupil load. They're going to be multilingual in their orientation and asset-based. They're going to be more inclusive. We've got to work together to create the settings, the support systems, the professional learning, and the parental involvement and community involvement that will make that possible, that will not only build what happens in the early childhood space in Head Start programs and state preschool programs and other early childhood centers and programs, but also will build the surrounding support systems that are needed for before and after care, for health and wellness, for nutrition. And we've got to do that in a way that takes the value and the virtue of child-centered, developmentally appropriate early childhood education, and not only creates it in those settings, but pushes it up through the primary grades so that we see all children coming to school in ways that are supported, joyful, developmentally appropriate, culturally responsive, and respectful and encouraging of the multilingual state that we are and want to increasingly become. We need to reflect on the ways in which we can continue to lean in on racial equity, on community power, on engagement in the design as well as the implementation of these new initiatives. We need to take the lessons we've learned about how to leverage the collaboration that we've achieved in some parts of the education system and use them for the transformation that we ultimately seek. For every school to be a place where students are greeted with all of the supports, all of the instructional strategies that are effective, and all of the love and caring and community engagement around a center of the community for schooling. That is the goal that we have been embarked upon. We need to implement all of these resources and programs in concert and in community, holding up the examples of collaborative innovation and success that are emerging across the state, and there are so many of them. We know that together we make the road by walking it, and we must walk it together. As the African proverb notes, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. We are on a long journey. We need to go far. We need to get to the place where every child in California is supported from birth through not only graduation from high school, but their engagement in higher education around the careers and the learning that we need in this century, where they have developed the capacity to learn, to be empowered to find knowledge and use it for their own purposes, for just purposes, for creating the kind of society we all want to be in, a California for all. So I thank you for all of the work that you're doing in this regard. Continue to encourage you to reach across the aisles and the divides that are necessary to bridge and continue to make the road by walking it.